Sometimes games are so good they last for decades. Runescape is one of them. It's crazy to think that Runescape was originally just the work of two brothers. Despite having recently turned 20 years old, Runescape is still alive and kicking, having seen a large increase of players on average since the release on Steam in late 2020. So how does Runescape hold up in 2021? And what are its biggest problems? And more importantly, is it worth playing? That's what we'll be covering in this video, so when you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. There are two versions of RuneScape, Old School RuneScape and RuneScape, previously known as RuneScape 3. I've played both games and both have their strengths and weaknesses, but for the remainder of this video I will focus on the modern version, being RuneScape. RuneScape is a PC-based MMORPG that is also available on mobile devices. It is however not fully released on Android or iOS, and you are currently only able to play it on an Android device in the open beta. If you consider to play RuneScape at all, I recommend playing it on a PC for a better experience. While RuneScape isn't the most expensive MMORPG on a monthly subscription basis at €9.50 per month, RuneScape does have a ton of other forms of monetization. This includes Treasure Hunter, a sort of box opening system, Solomon's General Store where you buy your premium cosmetics, Runemetrics Pro, a feature allowing you to track all of your drops, experience and so on, Bonds, a way of buying gold legally that happens to be really good for the game if you don't want to spend money, as these can be redeemed for membership, rune coins for the Solomon's General Store and Treasure Hunter keys, and the Yak Track, which is basically a premium pass temporary event. Just so you know, the developers do have a habit of introducing microtransactions, saying that they will tone down other microtransactions, but instead it just becomes a new form of revenue that gets added on top of everything else. This doesn't have to be an issue, but it is worth mentioning at the start of this video. Since RuneScape's release on Steam in October, the average player count has gone from 29,000 to a healthy 35,000 or more at any given point in time. This is easily checked on an online graph called misplaceditems.org. This doesn't mean that RuneScape only has 35,000 players, but it means RuneScape has 35,000 players on at any given point in time on average. If you're looking for an MMORPG that has a large player base, RuneScape still fits in that category despite what people say. This is not a dying game. It can, however, feel rather empty as the map is massive and RuneScape's player base is split over a plethora of different servers known as worlds. RuneScape even has a separate set of German, French and Portuguese servers that allow you to play the full game in a different language. Speaking a little bit about the client and the languages, RuneScape's PC client is what Jagex likes to call the NXT client, developed in C++. This client was released in 2016, replacing the previous Java-based client. Along with this client came many graphical improvements like an increased draw distance, improved water and reflections, better performance and much more. A fundamental and important change to plant the seeds for future content. Today's RuneScape looks decent at best when compared to other modern games or even modern MMORPGs like Black Desert or Elder Scrolls Online. That being said, I do believe RuneScape visuals have something nice about them despite not being that impressive. It gets the job done though, and it works, and you can feel immersed into the world with the exception of some older areas which RuneScape does have quite a few of. If you've never played RuneScape before, the nostalgia factor is out of the equation, and these old outdated areas can really kill your vibe. Some areas have not been updated in over 15 years, which is downright outrageous. It should be noted that you can change around the lighting in every single area for better or worse by using the built-in skybox filters, which does help some of the areas look a bit better. If you just look at new releases, you can clearly see that visually each update is looking better and better, and that is a big positive in my eyes. And because these newer areas are so large, it's easy to forget that some of the other parts in the game look terrible in comparison. One aspect I believe to be almost flawless is the soundtrack. I cannot think of any other game that has this many soundtracks that fit the area they play in so well. With over 1,300 unique pieces of music in RuneScape, the amount of variety is astonishing. RuneScape even holds holds the world record for most original pieces of music in a video game, a reward received back in 2017. Now sure, not every song is perfect or a 10, but there are so many great soundtracks in RuneScape, so let's quickly listen to some of my personal favorites. RuneScape, unlike other MMORPGs, is mainly driven by your mouse, as you move around the world by clicking instead of using WASD. This could be something you either love or completely hate. Since skilling is the largest section of content RuneScape has to offer, I'm going to start by talking about skilling. RuneScape has 28 skills, 17 of which free-to-play players can access, although for some skills that is very limited. These 28 skills consist of everything and anything you can imagine. Gathering skills involve around gathering raw materials directly from their source. This includes mining, fishing, farming, woodcutting, hunter divination, and archaeology, which is the newest skill to be added to RuneScape, and perhaps the deepest skill in the game as it has a plethora of content. I'll talk about this skill in some more detail later on. RuneScape then has artisan skills which revolve around using those raw materials to create items. This includes herblore, crafting, fletching, smithing, cooking, fire making, runecrafting, and construction. Following those skills, we have the support skills, which generally benefit your character in general, being agility, thieving, slayer, and dungeoneering. Finally, we have the combat skills which, surprise surprise, all evolve around fighting monsters and bosses, being attack, strength, defense, range, prayer, magic, constitution, and summoning. Something worth mentioning is that within RuneScape you need to train up 2 skills for melee instead of 1 with ranged and magic, because attack increases your accuracy and strength increases your damage, and with attack you can wield higher weapons, while strength doesn't really influence that much at all. Now for the sake of this video not becoming an hour long, I'm going to focus on a few skills that I believe are worth mentioning separately, as the other skills kind of already spoil what they do and what they're about. First of all, we have dungeoneering, one of RuneScape's oldest skills released in 2010, but one of the most unique in the fact that it's basically its own little game, involving multiple skills, puzzles, and bosses. Despite not having received many updates, it's still very much a unique part of the game that is worth looking into if you enjoy speedrunning and puzzles. With plenty of rewards throughout the levels you can use outside of the skill, this is definitely a skill I can recommend to new players. We then have Invention, RuneScape's only elite skill in the current game, released in 2016. This skill involves around disassembling items to get components and materials which you can then use to craft devices and augmentations for your gear. It also provides a variety of new items that can be used on a dozen of other skills for big benefits, and machines that can automate your tasks. The only catch is that Invention requires level 80 in smithing, divination, and crafting to access, meaning it will take you a while to unlock as a fresh account. Then Archaeology, RuneScape's newest skill and arguably the deepest skill with the most amount of content in the current game. Archaeology, much like other gathering skills, is based around clicking certain spots to gather raw materials, and in this case also ancient artifacts. You do this in not 1, not 2, but 7 different dig sites that are absolutely massive and possibly the most visually stunning areas in RuneScape to date. These dig sites go by the name of Caradet, the Infernal Source, Everlight, Stormguard Citadel, where you can fly, yes fly, in RuneScape, the Warforge, and finally the newest addition to Archaeology, the Orvan dig site, requiring level 90 Archaeology. Unlike other gathering skills, there's more to this skill as it has both crafting and quest-like elements to it, which makes it quite unique. The questy-like elements are mysteries you need to uncover and then solve, which are highly praised by the community. This skill also came with a plethora of new things, including collectible relic powers that give you passive buffs, ancient summoning that allows you to capture souls of monsters around RuneScape, ancient invention to obtain even better perks for your gear, new potions, new powerful weapons, and varied money-making methods. Despite the skill being quite the grind, there is no denying that this is one of, if not the biggest update RuneScape has had to date. Archaeology does come with one big con though. If you are trading the skill to level 99 or even beyond, you will need some extra bank space to store your unrestored artifacts, which can really clutter up your bank. The final skill I think is worth mentioning separately is Slayer, because it's basically the same thing as quests in many other MMORPGs. Slayer consists of grabbing a task from a Slayer Master, which consists of killing an amount of monsters and then grabbing a new task. There is a 100% chance that if you play other MMORPGs, some or perhaps all of the quests in that particular game are similar to this skill. The difference here is that Slayer isn't a critical part of the game, as it isn't vital to level up your character. In RuneScape, it's a substitute for training combat that also happens to make a good chunk of money at the higher levels. In fact, you can sort of customize the task you receive by blocking certain monsters and preferring others. I like it. It's a chill skill you can either AFK or train actively depending on your personal preferences, with good rewards, including quality of life upgrades like adding items to your tool belt, therefore removing the need of bringing them along, and it also gives you access to higher level money making methods that require a certain Slayer level. The skill also now has collection logs which can track the items you get from these monsters during your Slayer tasks. But the absolute best thing about Slayer is that the barrier to entry is almost zero. It's really easy to get into and doesn't require a lot of skill or knowledge about the combat system. Sure, it helps to be able to do good damage, but you'll do just fine with a decent action bar using Revolution combat mode. To elaborate a little more on the combat system, I'd like to cover the combat modes RuneScape gives you the choice of. Revolution is a combat mode that uses abilities from your action for you, reducing the amount of actions you need to put in per minute. Full Manual gives you full control of the combat system and abilities, similar to MMORPGs like World of Warcraft, but it's only a better choice if you want full control and know how to use it. Then we have Legacy Combat Mode, which could be called Nostalgia Combat Mode, being the old combat mode available to players that want to use it for nostalgia purposes. That being said, this combat mode is notably worse than the normal combat mode with some very rare exceptions. In the early game it can be good for one-shotting mobs though. The best thing about RuneScape is easily bossing, more commonly referred to as PVM. RuneScape has over 120 bosses, but if we exclude quest and non-beast tab bosses, it still has a very respectable 34. The reason I say respectable is because many of these bosses are completely unique in terms of design and mechanics. You have really easy DPS bosses that are so easy that some Slayer mobs are harder, but you also have mechanic heavy bosses that in my opinion are harder than most PVM content in other games. It will literally take you hundreds of hours to do these properly if starting from zero. But the amount of time to get into PVM has also been reduced drastically. You can easily start a fresh account and purely focus on training your combat related skills and hop into bossing within 50 hours of making a new account. And that might sound like a lot for some players, but please realize that RuneScape isn't a game about rushing to the end game. You don't need to play for hundreds of hours to enjoy the game, as the good stuff starts straight away. It just gets better the longer you play. As you reach higher levels, you have more stuff to choose from. Trust me, once you get into the mid game and start trying out bosses, you are going to have so much fun, especially with PVM content you can do with friends or clanmates, like 10-man raids, the relatively new 3 elite dungeons that feature trash mobs and 3 unique bosses each, which is a very realistic and accessible thing to do with friends, but really challenging when done alone. And you also have boss collection logs to collect all of your rare drops. No matter the type of player you are, there is something for you to do, and you can make bossing as hard as you want it to be, or alternatively as easy as you want it to be. No, I got food, that's no problem. Whoa, no I don't. You know, my herbal presets in my yak. It's all good though, we'll make... Dude, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding, there's a herb... RuneScape is about making your own story. You choose what you want to do, you set your own goals, and you decide how you want to play. Bossing isn't all sunshine and roses though. On the contrary, it has some big problems which I'd like to cover. The first is the awful tick system that RuneScape runs on. As a tick is 0.6 seconds, pretty much everything related to the game works with and around these ticks, and it makes the gameplay feel extremely clunky if you're coming from a different MMORPG. I didn't realize how bad it really was as I gotten used to it until trying out other MMORPGs like Guild Wars 2, BDO, Albion, and so on. Everything from using abilities to avoiding boss mechanics can sometimes leave you staggered as to why you took damage or messed it up despite having pressed the right buttons at the right time just because... When I tried to help introduce a credible MMORPG review by the name of the Lazy Peon to RuneScape PVM, he immediately noticed how dreadful the tick system was within the first few boss kills we did. Apart from the tick system making it feel clunky, RuneScape does have a server issue where highly populated worlds are extremely laggy, and this has been a thing for a few years now despite that the developers said they would be or are looking into it. It's so bad that players at the top end are using different versions of the client to avoid the slightest bit of lag. With all of this being said, as a casual player on a normally populated world, you won't notice too much of it. And finally, bugs evolving around some bosses. I'm going to keep this as vague as possible to avoid saying anything about some current bugs, but I believe the devs should fix certain bugs without content creators having to bring attention to them if they are already known. There's also a big grey area as to what is an acceptable bug and what is considered to be a bannable game-breaking bug. The last combat section I'd like to cover is PKing. PKing is something that is definitely a thing in RuneScape, however it's far from being as big as it used to be. In fact, many players call it dead content. While PKing isn't really dead content, it's as close as it could be to being dead content after multiple attempts to resurrect it having failed. Full loot PvP in the wilderness is definitely a thing, but 99% of the players are using cheap items to avoid losing anything. The only time the wilderness is really active is during Warbands, a PvP D&D that has instances of group PvP, but that's about it. It used to be a scary place with revenants and PKers roaming around. Nowadays it's just an empty area where people use the skilling methods that occasionally get killed for zero loot. He's gonna get killed. Prodox says, but kill him guys, kill Papado, do it.
Toxic.
RuneScape quests are by far the best of any MMORPG I've ever played. They have everything you'd want in quests, being a good story in logical order, cutscenes, likable characters, puzzles, and essential rewards. Quests in RuneScape give you a sense of adventure as they make you go around the magical world of Gielinor, and they take place in different ages, and honestly there's nothing that can rival them. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of lore in general, but even I can appreciate the newer quests, as there's plenty of ironic puns and corny jokes that make the dialogue worth reading. On the other hand, older quests feel outdated and clunky, especially when it comes to timed puzzles. They are just terrible and are what I believe what makes players hate quests, especially when essential items or unlocks are locked behind them. Two great examples are the Desert and Priv questlines, one unlocking an important runecrafting training method being the Soul Altar and the other unlocking Elf City. Overall though, quests are a great part of RuneScape, although for some players simply a frustrating process they have to go through. RuneScape also has a variety of minigames to play for fun or for experience rewards, although these are very much dead and players really only do them for experience rewards if they are worth doing, which is only when they are on Spotlight, increasing reward currency. I don't believe they're worth covering in depth, but they still very much exist and can add to the gameplay variety when played. Another thing I'd like to touch on, but I won't go too deep in, is RuneScape Mobile, a way of playing the game on the go on your mobile device. Available to pretty much all Android users in the open beta currently, but not openly available for iOS users yet. RuneScape Mobile is a full-fledged version of RuneScape, and it's exactly the same as the main game. You're in the same worlds and you share the same account. While RuneScape Mobile will make your phone quite hot, especially if you have a glass rear panel, it is relatively smooth and apparently from what I can see on the internet, easy to run with a mid-range phone. While mobile has some clear drawbacks for combat on the higher end of the spectrum, it will work perfectly fine for all skilling activities. There are a select group of players that solely play on mobile, but if I'm being entirely honest, I would not recommend playing the game on a mobile phone as a new player. That's just my 2 cents, but I truly believe your gameplay experience will be much better when playing on a computer or laptop. In terms of updates you can look forward to, they are working on a character rework currently, which is going to make your avatar look a lot better, and I'm really excited to see what it's going to be like in the live game. New Abyssal Slayer creatures, quality of life changes, perhaps the iOS mobile release, and Godwitch Dungeon 3. Despite the developers being slightly vague on this update, they are releasing quests leading up to this big update where you unlock this new area with those 4 new bosses, which will be dropping, I'm sure, interesting new things or items. In my opinion, Jagex has and probably will be delivering better content because last year we saw some great updates, including an in-game wiki button, graphical reworks, combat tooltips, object highlighting, resizable interfaces, new training methods, an archaeology expansion, and more. I'm looking forward to what Jagex has in store for us in 2021 that we don't yet know about. Now let's answer the question, is RuneScape worth playing and is it worth your money? RuneScape is a game that you can sink thousands of hours into, a game that can be both addictive but easy to burn out of as well. RuneScape is about adventure and making your own story. In my opinion, it's 100% worth playing and one of the best MMORPGs you can play. It is a free-to-play game, so it won't cost you anything to try out. That being said, the real experience is to be had with membership. Even though I said it was worth playing, let's go over some pros and cons real quick. This game has hundreds of quests, lots of PvM variety, skilling variety, minigames variety, and so on. There's lots to be done in this game, literal thousands of hours of content. It also has an active and welcoming community, which I can definitely vouch for, and there's many sub-communities in Discord, and even a fully fledged wiki that can help you along your journey. The game can be played as an idle game or second screen game, as you can AFK a lot of the content. There's a very long-term sense of progression, both visually and stat-wise. It is mobile and PC cross-platform, it's a small download, you can customize everything in your interface, and it's easier to get into than ever before. As for the cons, the interface can be quite confusing for new players, the tick system combat is dreadful, you have laggy high populated servers, although this isn't as noticeable if you're a casual player. PvM can have a steep learning curve depending on your own skill. Inactive PvP means you won't be able to play this game solely for the PvP, and this game can be addictive for some people, both leveling and gambling wise, because there is an in-game gambling system, which I have avoided in pretty much every video I've ever made because I simply don't think it should be in a game. It makes no sense. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it interesting. If you want more reviews, check out my playlist linked in the description below. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.